everyone, and thank you for joining us on this fine day. Today, we wanted to talk about design and open source and the relationship between designers and maintainers of open source projects. Hopefully, by the end of the presentation, we will help the maintainers in the audience understand better what designers can help with and how to find them, and convince the designers in the audience that they have valuable things to contribute to open source projects and how to get started. So we've already been introduced, but I'm Leia, and I'm joined by two other designers.
Hi everyone, my name is Kola.
Hi, I'm Nina.
And we are all UX designers at Canonical. As such, we are often asked if we work on Ubuntu, our most well-known project. But we actually work on a lot of different projects, including Canonical contract services for Kola, our internal tools for Nina, and the pro subscriptions for myself. The lovely people in this picture are also designers, and they work on other Canonical projects like Snaps or LexD. What we all have in common, though, is that open source is at the center of everything we do. This means that at the design team, we spend a lot of time thinking about open source. We wanted to get better at sharing our experience with design and open source, hence why we're here today. We have quite some ground to cover in this presentation. First, we will look at the wider context of design relationship with open source, what kind of challenges it poses for designers and maintainers, and share some ideas and solutions to make better, more inclusive projects. So I don't think I have to convince anyone here of the importance of open source or how it accelerates innovation and makes software more accessible. There are many reports showing how important open source software is and how widespread its adoption is. A figure that often comes back is that 90% of the software in the world is built using open source projects. Realistically speaking, though, most people have no idea. Open source is still a rather niche concept for the common person. Beyond a handful of projects, very few open source projects are part of the mainstream software landscape. And even amongst the popular logos here, a few are known for their complicated interfaces. There is a common trope that open source software can be quite overwhelming for new users, either because the learning curves are extremely steep or because the applications themselves are catering to a highly specialized audience with very specific needs. Looking at the contribution side of things also shows a disconnect. A quick Google search asking how do I get started with open source shows thousands of results, yet most of them are all about code contributions. For people that are not developers, but do want to get involved, it is quite difficult to know where to start. These gaps between mainstream audiences and projects, between new joiners and contributions, and between ideas and usable solutions, makes it quite difficult for the larger public to get invested in open source. Most people in open source communities agree that being open is more than making code transparent and available. It's about helping others and building meaningful projects. Yet, because the projects are not that accessible for a wide range of people, they don't reach them. This is an important gap to bridge. Actually, user experience is critical for adoption and impact. And it's not just us designers saying that. There has been a lot of research in commercial software supporting that. When looking at the wider tech industry, there are clear trends showing the link between adoption and design quality. Let's get into some statistics. Studies have shown that companies focusing on UX design can experience up to a 200% increase in user adoption. This is because good design can help build faster onboarding and training processes and drive higher satisfaction amongst users. Money-wise, for the same reasons, investing in UX design not only attracts users, but also yields financial benefits with up to a 300% improvement in return on investment when doubling down on UX design. Beautiful interfaces are perceived by users as more usable and trustworthy. This phenomenon, known as the aesthetic usability effect, suggests that users are more tolerant of minor issues when interacting with visually appealing designs. And overall, most successful tech companies attribute their success in part to effective collaboration between designers and engineers. So if the benefits of design and open source are clear, why is there still a gap between open source software and design? As UXers, we naturally wanted to better understand what was going on. So we did some research. We had two big questions in mind when we started. Why more designers were not contributing, why more projects were not open to design and over non-code contributions. To get insights into the answers we found, I will pass it on to Nina.
Thank you, Leia. So to answer this, we conducted a survey. Then we scheduled follow-up interviews with respondents and also interviewed a couple of design leaders to gather perspective. So we wanted to share what we learned with you. We had 150 participants in the survey, out of which 89 designers and 35 maintainers. Designers mostly rated themselves to be relatively experienced, but still more than half of them had never made a contribution to open source project before. Luckily for us, 50% of those designers who had never made contributions, it was simply because it never occurred to them. And for some, it seemed too difficult or beyond their design or technical capabilities. Project maintainers, on the other side, rated themselves a bit less experienced than our designer respondents. And majority of these projects actually do accept non-code design contributions, which means there are opportunities for designers to contribute. However, when looking at satisfaction with non-code contributions, most of these projects that are open to them are not receiving any. What's interesting when we compare contributions that designers are making and the contributions that projects need, aside from the UI design at the top, the other types of contributions don't seem to be aligned. That suggests that there is an opportunity for better alignment between designers and maintainers. We also asked what are the most likely obstacles preventing designers from contributing. Here, designers and maintainers are pretty much aligned. It starts with lack of awareness from both parties. First is lack of awareness which projects need design help, and lack of awareness about open source among the designers. On the other side, maintainers are emphasizing lack of design knowledge among themselves, and another major obstacle is also lack of access to projects and tooling. Looking at this data, we can already see some patterns and opportunities, but we wanted to understand more. And I'll hand it over to Kola to dive a little deeper.
Thank you, Nina. So like Nina has shown, the survey gave us a lot of interesting insights from the quantitative data. But to really understand more about the experience and challenges of the designers and the maintainers, we also scheduled a number of qualitative calls. And a couple of themes stood out to us. But first, a quick disclaimer. This section is based on the quotes and feedback from people that we spoke to. It is important to note that this only represents a small sample of maintainers and designers. There are a lot of projects that don't face these challenges, and we acknowledge that. So that being said, what challenges stood out to us? The first common challenge was discoverability. Maintainers didn't know where or how to attract designers on their project. And on the flip side, new design contributors also didn't know where to find open source projects with active communities that were open to non-code contributions. Our friends at Open Source Design and Contributor Design are already doing a really great job of aggregating open design tasks together. But some work can still be done to amplify those initiatives to design communities and to educate maintainers on how to make the most out of them. This is one of the things we're hoping to use Canonical's platform to do. The next common theme that we noticed was the different ways that maintainers and designers thought of contribution. Some maintainers admitted that they hadn't considered design contribution at all, while others weren't sure how a designer could add value beyond the logo or beyond UI. On the other side, there were designers that were eager to contribute in non-code, non-visual ways, through things like research, product strategy, information architecture, spec writing, and audits. This disconnect meant that maintainers weren't actively seeking these skills, and designers were facing a lot more pushback when they tried to contribute non-visual deliverables. Another thing that this disconnect affected was how designers were onboarded on projects. 6 of the 11 designers we spoke to mentioned working on projects that didn't have a great onboarding process or missing documentation. the kind of briefs that they would need to give them enough context to get started on a project right away. That being said, again, we also spoke to some communities that had some really cool initiatives to get a healthy amount of non-code contributions. Things like creating community AME sessions, or having a mentor system where contributors are paired to mentors, or as simple as having a getting started checklist. The fourth and most vocal theme was tooling. For many non-code contributors, platforms like GitHub and GitLab and Landscape have a steep learning curve. These people see an amazing project and they're excited to contribute, and then all of a sudden we have to learn about issues and pull requests and repositories, and it can be overwhelming. Many designers mentioned this was the hardest part of getting started contributing for them. Initiatives that help non-coders to onboard faster on this platform is a great opportunity to improve non-code contributions. At Canonical, we've started thinking about how these tools can talk to each other. And we have some ideas. If you have ideas that you're trying out in your own communities, we'd love to hear from you too. Designers also mentioned struggling with an unclear design evaluation process. And it's because giving design feedback isn't a skill that everyone is automatically great at. It's not an open source problem. It's a problem that designers face in designer and client relationships outside. We believe that doing the work to articulate how non-code contributions are reviewed and accepted would create a more objective, transparent process for everyone involved. But to be honest, it's not only about maintainer-designer collaboration. We noticed that designer-designer collaboration can also be tricky when designers are not consistent with documenting their contributions. Design is an iterative process. So many times, context from previous solutions are important for designers when creating new solutions. This is another place that we head across board that can be improved, maintaining design documentation. I am going to hand it back to Nina so she can talk about some of the solutions that we're working on in Canonical.
Thank you, Kola. So we identified all of these challenges, and of course, we wanted to provide some solutions as well. And when thinking about the solutions, we were first thinking about solutions for maintainers and then separately solutions for designers. But we realized that we can't really put them into buckets. It turns out that there is a gap there, but needs effort from both sides. And the good news is that it contributes to both. To tackle the challenge of missing documentation and help both maintainers and designers get started smoother, we created a contribution brief template. It's designed to give maintainers a clear idea of what designers need before they begin and help designers find the key information they need to contribute effectively. Here you'll find questions like, who is the project for? Where are you tracking the progress of the project? What kind of contributions do you need? And we also provide a list of possible design contributions, so it might help maintainers to learn about different areas. We really tried to cover what we thought is essential for the designers, and at the same time, not overwhelm maintainers with documentation. We already tested it with some maintainers and designers, gathered some feedback, and we continue refining it. Now we're working on making it more widely accessible. If you try it out, we'd love to hear your thoughts. A lot of people have raised concerns about the contribution process, exactly what Kola was saying before. And the reviews for designers are very challenging. And we can confirm that from our own experiences. Most of our products are open for contribution, and yet it's already unclear how we contribute to our own design system. To give a little bit of a backstory, our design system, Vanilla, is maintained by a dedicated group of engineers and designers. But of course, any designer or engineer can and should contribute to it as well. And maybe it sounds simple, but to make sure that, that all the contributions are aligned with the guidelines and quality expectations, it's not that easy. So our design system working group has been working on an internal contribution process. And while we are still working on the external one, we wanted to share what we have so far. If you're interested, you can have a look. And if you find it useful, please leave comments or questions in the document as we continue in improving it. This one is not easy. The tools we have available at the moment don't enable the same peer review system or contribution as Git tools. And yet it's one of the major key obstacles. So we were asking ourselves, how might we make the tooling more accessible for designers? And unfortunately, we don't have an answer yet today. But we started with interviews to define user needs and requirements, as UX designers do. We also wanted to extend this question to other communities. So we started working at universities to bring this question to the students. And this is a call out to you too. Do you have any ideas or suggestions? If yes, please check our brief and hopefully it will inspire you. In the meantime, as we are figuring out proper tooling, we thought, well, let's help designers to better understand Git environments. We realized that there are not many public resources on GitHub for designers. So first we trialed an internal workshop for Git for designers, which was really well received. And now we're working on making it public, but it's not there yet. So we'll post on Discourse, blog, and all other channels when we have it. And in the future, we're also hoping to run more on-hands workshops. So stay tuned. In the end, it comes down to communication. We believe that better communication can solve a lot of problems, from onboarding to happier contribution process. In the end, better communication will enable more design contributions to open source projects. Unfortunately, there is no magic solution to better communication. There are, of course, many techniques and training around, but in the end, it depends on all of us. As designers, we still need to get better at explaining the value of design so we can move the conversation from pixels to strategy. And open source maintainers and engineers, we need you to help us understand your side of the project and communicate your needs. We are actively looking for ways to talk to more people in different events to better understand both sides. But of course, it's not just us working on this. There are many solutions out there already. And I'll hand it over to Leia.
Thank you, Nina. Yeah, overall, there are many solutions out there already and many people doing great work. The open source design website has a lot of projects listed and some nice guidelines, the same with contribute.design. We initially wanted to share some tips for designers on how to get started, but when seeing all the great talks in the coming hours and days, we decided to leave that to the speakers of 2 talks going on later to cover the open design guide and the onboarding designers into open source projects. So go check them out. But yeah, this is what we have so far, and we would love to hear from you. What resonated, what's missing, how can we make this more impactful? And as usual, if you have anything you want to share with us, you can send us a message at opendesign@canonical.com. Do we have any questions, maybe?
So we don't have a microphone. Can we just speak up loud, please? The first lady on the...
I can speak loud. Hi, thank you for your talk, everyone. I've got lots of questions, but my main question is, did you put your research that you did with designers and maintainers in like a PII removed, like open repository so other people can use the research data for their own purposes?
Not yet, but yes, we are working on it. We were just thinking after this talk, we'll share it because now we finally have everything put together, prepared in a way that we can actually share it. But this is our first time actually sharing the results. And yeah, we'll make it more accessible as well.
Can we have the next question?
So I had a question about the product thinking, because usually when you talk to the industry, like, oh, if you want to build a good product, you need a strong product thinking, unified product direction. Based on your experience and maybe what you've learned, how do you deal with that in an open source environment? Because people can come from many directions and just plug things on top of a product and lose that. So what have you learned on that?
Yeah, well, to be honest, this is kind of the purpose of having really strong contribution guidelines, because what we found discussing with people is that most people are okay if you tell them, well, I didn't really consider your idea because this is what we wanted to do, and this is not exactly going in that direction. So the clearer you are about what you're expecting and what you want to do, the better it is to make sure that whatever comes your way is more or less aligned with what you want to do. So it's kind of tricky because you need to first know what you want to do. Second, you need to make sure that you're articulating this really well. And then third, when you do receive contributions, you do need to make sure that you're crystal clear about how you're evaluating them and be precise about the reason why you're accepting them or rejecting them. It is really difficult and it requires a lot of diplomacy. But yeah, I think that's the most helpful thing. I don't know if Nina and Kola.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, that was product thinking, and contributing to product thinking was another thing that designers said they had a lot of pushback on, because you could give a lot of like design feedback, but like if you wanted to talk about the architecture or the strategy, then you got a lot of pushback. It's back to what Leah said. If there is a clear process for evaluating things like that, then it's not going to be as subjective. The reality, at least from the people that we spoke to, was because there isn't any clear process. It's purely subjective, purely in the mind of the chief maintainer. And so they get to decide like what goes and what doesn't go. And sometimes they don't follow the research. So yeah, the work needs to be done in like really articulating what your process is, so that anyone can plug into that process and then they can use that as like a baseline to evaluate things.